Today I figured I am tired of a statue that it's been sitting on my coffee table, I'm pretty sure since my first apartment in Seattle, like 5 or 6 years ago. I feel like my style has transitioned away from this little statue, and so I figured if I can make my own, why wouldn't I try to make my own? There's a couple of reasons that I'm going to be trying my hand at sculpting today. Sculpture, when it's original art, tends to cost a lot of money because sculptors deserve their bag. I could also go to a big box store like CB2, Restoration Hardware, Anthropology. They can have cute stuff. I'm not saying that these things aren't cute, but they're also mass-produced, which is a little oxymoronic to me personally. I know that's a bit of a douchey opinion, but to me, mass-produced art is kind of like a jumbo shrimp situation. Like, art should be special, and it should be idiosyncratic, and it should represent you and the artist who made it. So for this sculpture, what I'm going for is something that really bridges the gap between beautiful and cute. I think it's common that when people first start making their own art or even designing their own homes, that we kind of gravitate towards subjects and aesthetics that are a little more on the sophisticated or serious side. But what I've realized as I've relaxed into my own personal style is that what I want more than anything from my home is just a feeling of being creatively energized and a place that just makes me happy to be there. Both my husband and I have a soft spot in our hearts for sheep, so maybe that's part of it too. But I just think we could all use some more cute fat sheep in our lives. This design was inspired by 2 artists. The first is Taisto Kaasinen. He was a Finnish ceramicist from the 20th century whose work I just find it really cute and funny, and it goes for around $200 per piece, which is a fair price, but also makes me feel le pour. But anyway, I love his use of shape. I think it makes his art very playful. And the second artist is local to my area. Her name is Makiko Ichiura. She has these sculptures called Sheep Eyes Open that I saw and absolutely loved at a gallery on Whidbey Island, so a big shout out to her. I'll put a link to some of her stuff down below. It is just so whimsical and lovely, and it's absolutely worth checking out. If you're using air dry clay like I am, you're going to start by building what's called an armature. From what I've read about sculpting with clays, this basically acts as the skeleton of your project, and it's going to give your piece structure and allow you to use less clay. And that's a good thing because the paper clay, which is the type of clay I'm using here, is the most expensive part of this project. Also, air dry clays have to be applied in very thin layers that you allow to fully dry in between to avoid cracking. So if you beef up your armature, that also means you'll spend less time overall on your project waiting for things to dry in between the fun part, which is the sculpting. I went through it with this thing. It was by far the most obnoxious and fiddly part of this project. It did make me go a little bit crazy. Really lost my balls. I have found a suggestion, which is that if you are cutting styrofoam, try not to use a dull kitchen knife. I imagine that would be safer, as I gesture at the camera wildly with a knife. I doubt the people who showed up today expected to be threatened at knife point on camera as I built a sheep out of trash. Okay. Done. So it's been about 2 hours later, and we went out for lunch because we were dying of hunger. So I'm gonna eat while I explain what the fuck I learned while I was making this armature, because I learned a lot. You will need, just first and foremost, you should know one of 3 things to to make one of these. You will either need to be very good at this and have any actual experience or skill, you will need to have the patience of a saint, or you will need to be powered by the quiet rage of perfectionism. Don't go with styrofoam. Go ahead and use cardboard or a crumpled up newspaper. I ended up covering it with some chicken wire just because I am a little concerned about how well the clay will bond to the duct tape. This is where we're at. These are some of the things I learned about armatures. It did, again, take about 2 hours. You know, get in there, go to the bathroom before you sit down and work this out. So now we're gonna move on to the clay part, which will hopefully be less sticky, less pokey, and less obnoxious than building this base structure was. I've never worked with paper clay before, so first I'm gonna try a project that's a little easier. I'm hoping that it's a little easier. I'm just gonna make a little trinket dish, kind of get a feel for what this is like to work with. So, let's do this thing. Let's keep it rolling forward. So paper clay is kind of cool because there's little paper fibers in the clay. God, that sounds dumb. But it's really cool because when it dries, the little paper fibers actually can create a little more structure and strength in whatever you make. Actually smells kind of nice. Usually, from what I've read online, you want to work your clay a little bit. So I'm gonna try to do that. This clay is actually surprisingly a lot less sticky than what I was warned about on the internet. I think it's still a good idea to spread out a little parchment paper on whatever surface you're working on. I think this would, oh God, how'd hair get on that? This is like the curse of doing projects in a house with 3 dogs. Is that whatever you make, there's gonna be dog hair in it. All right. And now I'm gonna cut from this little guy 4 equal-sized pieces. Because again, I'm making feet, so I want them all to be the same size. That's also a little big. It's kind of cute. It's definitely odd. That can start drying. Some snot came out. All right, so we came back a couple days later. This thing has totally dried, which is awesome. I'm happy that I did it to kind of work some of the kinks out before I go in with the big project and the paper clay. And one thing that is good to know is that it has dried way lighter than I thought it was. So I'm actually happy that I beefed up my armature as much as I did, because this is super lightweight. It feels much more like a paper mache than it feels like a conventional clay. So good things to know all around. And I am going to tackle the beast. So I'm gonna get started. So my technique for this first layer is to apply the clay in as thin of a layer as I possibly can across the entire sculpture. Like I explained before, and I will explain many times in this video, I really want to avoid cracking, which can happen when you apply the clay too thickly. And even here, I still at various points applied the clay too much. So just know, if you want to avoid the step of filling all those cracks in, you need to use very thin layers of clay. This layer that I'm working on here will act almost like a shell that I can build off of. Then I can go in with more clay once it's dried and build it up from there.
Chance you're thinking about me. If I change my place, babe, once you come back to me, make no mistakes, babe, once you come back.
So I'm finished letting the first layer of clay dry, and now I'm gonna go in with my second layer. So the first layer of clay was all about kind of creating that shell that now I can build off of, and try to create a shape that better approximates what I had drawn in my original design. You can see on this side that I've started going in already with a little bit more of a wet mixture of the clay. I've just been putting my fingers in some water and mixing it with the paper clay. I'm just smoothing in all the gaps that were left over by the pieces of clay that I used in the first layer, and I'm just trying to master a texture that has a little bit of grain. It's not entirely smooth, but looks a little bit more refined.
I'm on my knees and I'm begging you, please. Is there any chance you're thinking about me? If I change my ways, babe, won't you come back to me? Make no mistakes, babe, won't you come back to me? Come back, come back, won't you come back?
Okay, so I stayed up super late the other night trying to get this as far as I could get it in one night, and honestly, I really like it. I think it's super cute. It's not perfect, but I wasn't going for perfect. So that's my get out of jail free card. I like it. I think it's cute. It's gotten a lot closer than I expected to the original design, which is awesome. I did lay some sections with, I guess, a little bit of thicker clay than I was supposed to, because we ended up with some pretty gaping cracks on this poor little guy, and unfortunately his tail fell off. So I'm gonna have to redo the tail. All that is fine. The cracks I more or less expected. I have to do what's called now a slip coat, where you basically take some of your clay, you mix it up with water so it's a little runnier, and then you stick it in all of the little cracks, and then it fills them on up. And then besides that, while I'm at it, even though perfection is not the goal, there are a few sections that I'm going to try to make a little less bumpy before I seal the whole thing with some gesso, and then we paint it.
Haven't had a single day of duty, just to show you that my love is real. Do you even care when I stay? Oh baby, can you even tell I'm under your spell? Oh baby, I just wanna take another look at you so our eyes can finally meet. I just wanna take another
All right, so we are finally in the end game of making this sculpture. So the first thing we have to do to finish her off is cover the sheep in a layer of gesso that's going to seal the clay off from as much humidity that's in the air as possible. Or at least this is my understanding from what I've read online. In any case, I have 3 aquariums in the room where she's going to be sitting, so I don't want to take any chances. Hallelujah, it is finally time to paint. I really wanted to make a black sheep, but obviously I ended up taking some artistic liberties with the colors, so the piece has a nice blue undertone. The good news is, because this is an air dry clay, that I'm not firing anything, so I can always go back in and change the color if it ends up really not aging well to me. You'll see that I'm adding lots of baking soda to my paint. This is a very common hack online that you'll see everywhere on YouTube. I'm sure it's on TikTok as well. The way that I've seen it used most often is to make smooth textured vases look like they're made from a ceramic. I'm using quite a lot here to really try and capture a very rough, textured clay appearance.
Despite all, you're my best friend.
Okay, so we are at the end of something like 3 days of work. I don't know how many hours I have spent on both of these projects. We are left with only one question. Was this worth it? Now, for some, you may have gotten to the end of this 15-minute long video and decided that this is exactly why you go to CB2 for your art. And that's fine, I can't fault you for that. But what I was trying to do, or what I am trying to do, is live a little more creatively. And sometimes that means taking some risks, even if you don't know whether the project's going to turn out well. And I have to say, in this case, I'm honestly really pleased with how it turned out, especially the sheep. It looks really close to my original design, which it doesn't happen that often that things actually come out looking how you'd hope they'd looked. The trinket dish is so-so, and even though there were a lot of ups and downs with both the projects, particularly the sheep project, I'm honestly, I'm happy I did it. It made me feel like a kid again, where you always have like an art project going on at home, and I love that feeling. So I'd encourage anyone to go out and get some clay and try making your own art, even if it turns out like it's not a way to spend your time. And isn't that what we're all hoping for these days? So yeah, until next time, go out, make some shit with some clay. It's a good time.